G'day to Dazs. Got a fellow
Hey,
Aussie
Terry.
on today. Nice to see you.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. Daz, you're a bit better known in the community than the folk I've interviewed so far. You are known as the co-founder of Looking Glass Education that started here in Australia. Yeah, you and Seb, was it you and Seb who started it?
Yeah, it's a multinational effort actually. So yeah, there's a couple of us involved. So myself and Jason is a guy in the US, and then Foss in Canada, Greg Foss. We were the first sort of three to kick the ball running, and then Seb's in Canada. We've got Max in Germany, we've got Dahlia in the US, and James in the US. So it's a sort of multinational effort. But yeah.
Oh, it's a bigger enterprise than I'd sort of understood. Okay, this is cool. I'm going to learn loads about this as we go. But that is not what we're going to start on, because the whole idea of this podcast, as I often say at the intro, is to kind of get a feel for the people behind the surface. So we can all talk about Bitcoin till the cows come home. We all feel very strongly and very passionately about it. And those are the conversations we'd love to have. And that's why I started this podcast. I love just connecting with other Bitcoiners. And as I was saying to you just before we started, a lot of this happened for me because I loved so much the Bitcoin conference in April in Miami, and just connecting with other Bitcoiners and chewing the fat and talking about the fiat Ponzi scheme and so forth. But what I want to do is I'm really looking to explore, do we have values in common? Are there reasons why the particular people who are involved in Bitcoin at this early end of the journey have been so drawn to it and feel so passionately about it? And there may not be any common values. I mean, I think as I'm starting to talk to people, I'm getting a little bit of a thread here and a little bit of a thread there, but it's really a discovery process. So I'm going to ask you, so there's some content out there that gives a bit of your background and how you ended up in this space, but I'd like to delve a little deeper and kind of get right into your childhood and who you were as a kid and what you were like with the people around you. And are you very different from your siblings, if you've got any? Kind of some of that historical stuff. Were you very molded by your parents? What kind of values did they have? Were yours very different from theirs? So that's kind of the rabbit hole I'd like to dig into as a starting
That's
point, and
awesome.
we can evolve it from there. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, Daz.
I'm the youngest kid of six, actually.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, big family. My mum had three girls to a prior marriage, and my father had was raising my oldest brother on his own, and then they met and had me and my second oldest brother. So youngest of six, but we all grew up together, very much sort of the Brady Bunch, but very much
Yeah.
saw each other as loving siblings along the way. And yeah, both my parents were, loving parents. I was very fortunate in my upbringing. Was, sort of didn't want for anything, but they, very much provided everything that we needed: schooling, shelter, clothes. Very fortunate upbringing. But I mean, there wasn't a lot of money when we were growing up, so money was something that I sort of grew up having a respect for. My first job, I think I had when I was 10, delivering newspapers around the local community, getting up early in the morning, sort of rolling, mum would get up with us and help me and my brother roll the papers, and then we'd jump on our bikes and we'd be out and we'd be throwing the papers. But both my parents were factory workers. Mum worked in a canteen in a factory and my father worked in a factory. So, they were good, stable jobs and provided, like I said, roof over your head, clothes on your back, shoes on your feet. What more could you sort of need growing up? It was a loving family. My mum was deeply Christian too. So she, my father, not so much. But every Sunday we were packed into the van. We had a, blue Mitsubishi L300 Express Bongo van, and she'd go around. And my mum was a amazing saint of a woman, and we would go around and pick up half the neighborhood, half the elderly around the neighborhood, and we'd all squeeze into this van, and then we go off to church and off we go to Sunday school, which I absolutely hated. But anyway, we could dig into that a bit later, I suppose. But
Most kids do.
just a loving family. But I'm the youngest, like I said, and there's a bit of a gap. So my older brother, he's 2 years older than me, and then the next one up is about 10 years older. So
Oh, wow.
those siblings were a lot older. So sort of as we hit around that sort of 8 to 10 year mark, most of them went off and got married, and I became an uncle at 10 years old. So I was very much a hands-on uncle at 10, basically just the ring-in babysitter, I think. But it was a good upbringing, loving family, and very, very fortunate.
Were your siblings parenting you as much as your parents were, your older siblings?
My eldest sister did a lot, actually. So around sort of that early years, I think mum used to work some night shifts and do all that sort of stuff. So my dad was very much a bit of a man's man, I suppose, and wasn't very hands-on as far as the the upbringing of children. But so it fell into my older sister's shoulders, actually. So she was pretty heavily involved. I think that shaped her up to be a pretty good mum too.
Yeah, cool. So what were your parents doing? What kind of work did they both do?
So yeah, like I said, factory work. So dad worked at a chicken processing plant, and my mum worked from the sort of what I can remember, worked in catering a lot. So in sort of cafeterias and canteens and kitchen sort of work and serveries kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And you just went to the local school?
Yeah, local public schools. Just around the local area. Didn't have to travel too far. It was close enough that we could as we got a bit older, we could ride our bikes and walk to and from school. And we had a lot of we had some foster kids actually when we were kids as well. Mum had we already had a roof of 6, and to this day I'm amazed at the sort of house that we grew up in, how we managed to fit all those people in. And yeah, because we'd have some foster kids stay with us from time to time as well. So like I said, mum was a saint. She saw the good in everyone and gave a lot, freely without any sort of expectation for reward. Just a saint of a woman.
Beautiful. How did that, there she is, she's taking in foster kids, she's picking up all these people, taking them to church. She sees the good in everyone. How does that impact you? Like, how does that shape you as a person?
Oh, I think it, has always instilled that sense of there being a greater purpose than, sort of what you put on the earth for. And I think to some sort of degree, that's always sort of resonated with me about wanting to help people,
Yeah, right. Okay. So that
And
is,
I guess some of us have different skills and abilities to do that. Like I probably don't have the patience or, that those skills to adopt foster kids like sort of she did. I mean, she didn't adopt them full time, but we definitely gave them shelter for periods at a time, and I don't think that's a particular skill set that I have, so it's not something I would probably go out and do, but very much instills that sort of those values that there are a lot less fortunate people than you in this world, and you do what you can to try and bring about a better world for everybody.
yeah, absolutely. So what did you find yourself drawn to? So you've got that instilled in you, and as you said, we all go about helping the world in whatever way, according to the skills that we develop along the way. So what did you find yourself? I'm really intrigued by this idea at the moment. I'm just a bit, not quite obsessed with it, but I keep asking it of everyone I meet until I feel like I've got a satisfactory answer. I'm really interested in, I suppose it's a little bit of this nature versus nurture thing and how we come to be who we are. Like I was saying to someone else recently, our son has got like a skill set that's very different from his father and I. And I'm very differently wired in many ways to my parents, although you could argue there are certain elements about my character that are quite similar to them. So actually, these are two different questions, aren't they? I guess I'm interested, where did the character come from? And then the skills that we're drawn to or that we develop along the way. So I want to explore let's go character first, and then let's get into skill sets. So as a character, I mean, you're a good case study. So against 6 siblings, one of whom has both of the same parents, 4 of whom have one different parent. and then foster kids coming in and out who got at least some influence from your parents. Are you very different from some of them? Are there characteristics that you think are in common with some of them? How does that work? Because I'm an only child and my son's an only child, and my mother was almost an only child because her two brothers living in London were off at war. So she was brought up on her own. She was 10 years younger. And my father was in boarding school from the age of 3. So he was almost an only child, even though he had a sister also in her own boarding school. So there's really very little I can go by to go, what's it like to have siblings and how similar are you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something I've got to say I don't know if I've spent a lot of time reflecting on, but sort of just as we're sort of, you're posing those questions, I'm sort of thinking through, and I guess like each of those 6 siblings, we have similar characteristics and similar traits in certain areas, but very much we're all largely individuals. Like, I wouldn't say I'm probably, if anything, the middle sister. I'm probably more alike, and I don't know if that's just because we're, I don't sort of dive into horoscopes too much, but we're both Capricorns. So there could be some correlation there, but very similar temperament.
Which is
Quick to anger,
describe that temperament.
stubborn.
Is that a Capricorn?
I don't know, but that's what we both are. So it's probably a thing. Yeah. No, it's a good question. So and if you compare to your parents, really nothing like either of them. Really, it's an interesting question. It's funny how you get shaped over time, and and I guess it's just your own interest, and whatever you sort of resonate with as you're growing up is what you sort of dive into. Like, I wasn't, my brother was probably more sporty than I was sporty, but I was more musically talented than he was. So, they're the sort of things that dominated your life. And I guess from that as well, there's a certain amount of sort of traits that come along with that, as far as sort of, if you're sporty, you might be a bit more competitive, whereas if you're sort of musically talented, you might be less competitive. You know what I mean? It's not really, it's more of a team sport, isn't it? Sort of music, in a way, if you're playing in bands and so forth. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. And what's the second one? I've forgotten.
We'll come back to it because I want to keep going down this track of music now that you're
Cool.
I will come back to the skills things. Well, it's related actually, because I guess it's what were you then drawn to in terms of interests? And I know music's been big for you from very early on. So what was that all about? Where do you think that came from?
My auntie was very musically talented, but we weren't close. So I don't know if there's sort of any links to sort of heritage or family, but I always, for as long as I can remember, wanted to play the guitar, and parents bought me an acoustic guitar when I was 8, and there was a man that lived across the road who taught guitar. So I used to hodl over there at 8 years old, and I learned how to read music, and I learned how to play in a classical style. But guitar was very much a love-hate relationship, believe it or not. So over the years, there would be years at a time I wouldn't even touch a guitar, but because I always had that fundamental learning and learn how to read and learn how to play, read chords and all that sort of stuff, sort of was able to pick it up quickly and put it back down, pick it back up, put it back down. And I'd get frustrated with it, to be honest, too. So, there was periods of that time where, I'm 40 odd now, so I've been playing a long time. So if you sort of think 30 years of playing, someone should be an absolute weapon at something. Where I'm pretty handy, don't get me wrong, but if you were to play 30 years flat, consistent, disciplined practice, you'd be an absolute weapon on the thing. But unfortunately,
or you may just burn out.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true. Yeah, but music was just something that always just resonated with me. I just love playing music. I love making music. It's something. It's an escapism. You can get out of your head. I was a little bit ADHD as a kid too. So I think it was just a good thing to channel those energies into, and have a release outlet. You know, I was never diagnosed that, but definitely on that side of those spectrums, for sure. There's definitely some tendencies there. I think, you know, they're so quick to diagnose kids these days. I think they would have been straight in the office and it's like, you need to get this dude assessed. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, how does that play itself out? Like, how do you see that in your life?
Oh, look, and it's one of those things. It's I consider it a superpower in a way, because as soon as I'm interested in something, I obsess over it. Kind of like Bitcoin and investing and whatever I'm into at the time. I'm very much able to. This is my thing now, and I'm in it 100%. So, you know, you can channel that focus and that laser focus in on that thing, and it becomes an obsession. And then I just need to know everything I need to know about this. So whether that's, you know, reading, practicing, playing, you know, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts. It's this is the thing I'm into, and this is what's happening. And
Right.
I've been like that my whole life.
Yeah. Okay. Complete immersion. So, all right. So I'm hearing a number of things already coming through. So I'm hearing you were pretty resourceful, like you were teaching yourself, almost not teaching yourself music, but you had this very clear idea and you wanted to go down that track and you made that happen. You've got your first job by the age of 10. Well, two jobs really, because you're delivering papers, but you're also babysitting your nieces and nephews. So
Unpaid. Yep.
what's that? Not paid, yeah.
Unpaid work. Slave labor.
Family are bad like that, aren't they? So you've got this kind of sense of initiative that I'm hearing, and a kind of a will of your own. And you can call it stubbornness, but what I'm hearing is, and it's related to the ADHD, it's like, I've got this thing, I want to pursue it. Let's go. And you're saying that's
Sure.
a
That's a good way
bit
of summing up.
a bit sort of specific to you, and maybe your sister's got it too, your Capricorn sister. Yeah? Is that similar for her,
Yeah,
or is it just
probably less so much, but no, I'd say probably I'm the only one in the family that sort of has that to that level. I would say, if I'm to be honest, yeah.
yeah, okay, all right, so that's interesting. So you were clearly drawn to music. What else was going on for you at school? What kind of student were you? What kind of friends did you hang out with? And were there any other subjects other than music that you found really enjoyable or easy?
Always loved math. Math was always an enjoyment for me. I was always fairly good at it, so that's why I enjoyed it. I think it was a little bit effortless for me, to be honest. I didn't have to try very hard at maths. In saying that, I didn't do advanced maths into high school. I took the easy way out, which we can talk a bit about. I went off the rails a little bit, but I was a pretty much straight A student right up to year 10, and uh, you know, good student. Although I was drawn more to the popular crowd, I wasn't sort of drawn to the nerdy crowd. I was definitely drawn to the more popular and the naughty kids. A little bit. I was probably a bit of a naughty kid myself, and largely I think that was due to I found schoolwork relatively effortless. I was very lucky to be pulled out of that lottery.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is an element of luck to that. There's everyone likes to quote that. I think it's a Liberace quote, which is the harder I work, the luckier I get. But there's an element of luck to just being born with the physical health, with the mental capability, with there's a certain amount of that. All of those things can be overcome, but there is a certain amount of luck to the lottery, as you say, the genetic lottery. So tell me about going off the rails and where that took you.
Yeah, so I guess where do you start with that? I guess around the age of 12, probably started just hanging out with probably some of the worst kids that I could have been. Started smoking cigarettes. Found where Dad used to hide. My dad used to hide his cigarettes. He used to hide it from Mum, which we didn't know for years, but we found them. And still cigarettes from his you know, I got an addictive personality too, which is kind of probably alluded to earlier, but very much, you know, those sort of things. An addiction is a problem for me. Started probably with cigarettes, wrong crowds. Started getting probably a little bit wayward around that year 9 mark. Started smoking marijuana. And that become a little bit of a dominating force in my life. And around that year 10 mark, you know, just started wagging school. So I worked out that I had no ambitions to go to university. I knew I wasn't going to go to university. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. There was no ambition to be a tradie. There was no ambition to be, you know, maybe that was just smoking excessive marijuana. I don't know, but marijuana definitely was a catalyst for me developing a laziness about my just everyday attitude towards life and work and all this sort of thing. And by that stage, you know, I had a job pretty much since I was 10. At that stage, I was working at a fruit shop with a lovely family run fruit shop that were very patient with me. I think they knew a lot more than they let on, but I'm very thankful. I'm still close to those people today. You know, started smoking weed and then started doing some heavier drugs, you know, started taking some acid, and this was all in school. So I'd wag school. I still had that big blue bongo van, which we grew up with, that was sort of given to me to run around with. And I'd pull up at school and say, right, who's coming? And we'd just go and we'd smoke weed and we'd play guitar and play hacky sack. And I was pretty good at hacky sack by the end of, you know, year 12. And
Shame
amazingly,
you
so
couldn't
I
get
think
marked for that.
I know I could mix it up with the best of them. You know, and I sort of worked out that if I did the bare minimum in school, you mean I got kicked out of science for being disruptive. Wasn't allowed back in, so science sort of never went back to science. Got kicked out of history. Never went back to history. But you know, I found out that if I could just rocked up and did the maths tests, so I didn't have to attend the maths class because I did a lower grade sort of entry level math course, which I'd already learned it all. So I'm like, well, if I just rock up and when the tests are on, and I'll just pass the tests and I'll just get away with it. So I ended up with a pass certificate for year 12, having honestly thought about this, wagged every single day from year 10 to year 12, at least, you know, sort of one period. That's not something I'm necessarily proud of. That's not to, but I'm incredibly lucky that I got away with that. To be perfectly honest, and I didn't, you know, very possible I could have fucked my entire life up, you know, having been kicked out of school at anywhere along that path would have had a drastic change to the outcomes in my life had that occurred. So I was very lucky at that stage. And, you know, probably get a little bit personal here. It was around that time too. My mum got sick. So mum was diagnosed with cancer, and she was a big part of my life, and she died when I was 18. So it was that whole period was just probably, you know, a catalyst with that as well. It's like, you know, sort of just take an attitude of fuck life, you know, let's have fun while we can. You know, so she died at 18, like I said, and that was a bit of a wake up call for me. So around sort of age of 19, probably still hung on, and then age of 19, I decided that was enough for me. Had some bad trips, taking eckies and stuff like that by that stage, and sort of around that 19-year mark, probably about a year after, I met a girl, and she wasn't into drugs, and I just stopped, just like that, and never touched them since.
Good for you. Absolutely fantastic to hear.
And it was amazing the level of clarity that gets lifted. You know, I can even think back. It was mainly the weed, mainly marijuana is a very, I think, insidious. It creeps on you. You know, I don't necessarily think it's an addictive drug, but you definitely get addicted to the lifestyle and the feeling of being bombed out of your head. You know, and just it was a conscious mental lifting, a mental clarity. A veil was lifted, you know, within months of me stopping. It was like, wow, I'm never going back to that, because got so much. I didn't know how much of my mental clarity I was suppressing by doing it every day, you know.
Amazing. It's interesting that there's a lot to delve into here.
I told you you'd find some stuff that I haven't shared on previous pods. Well done, Carrie.
Well, I'm going to start actually, funnily enough, because I've just interviewed someone else and we both started talking about acid as well. So given that that's a theme for the week, I'm going to go down that path because I was doing acid about the same age you were. So years 11 and 12 for me, and then beyond, but particularly around that time and then the year or two after that. Anything kind of insightful that came out of that? No, actually, I want to tie this in. Actually, I'm going to tie this into your Christian upbringing and go, was there and actually the last guy I interviewed was also a stoner. So funnily enough, also church-going Christian background in India. So
Oh, wow.
he was Roman Catholic in India, smoking joints outside the church on Sundays, and then going down the track of the trance scene in India, which is really big, and kind of acid there. And I always feel like, for me anyway, it was a bit of a waste. Like, yes, I was always journeying actually at some level for truth. There was always a truth seeker in me. But I think I wasted the opportunity of my acid days because I was too busy partying. And I think if I'd known what I know now and kind of had the experiences in meditation that I've had, there could have been something much bigger that opened up for me with acid. So
100%.
yeah,
I
right.
feel exactly the same with that. So very much recreational, my acid taking, where I feel there's a spiritual side and a depth to that, which I, wasn't even conscious of that it existed back then. And I very much, it's only been recently been reflecting on this. I've gone down a bit of a meditation journey myself. Only recently I've sort of dabbled around the fringes of this for the last few years, but never really taken much seriously. But recently I have, and I've been doing a bit of reflecting on that. I agree 100%. I think it sums it up beautifully. I think I would love to go back to those days and explore it more because I would never do it again at this stage of my life, having young children and so much at stake that depend on me to risk anything bad happening because as I said, I had a couple of bad trips towards the end, which sort of was enough for me to go, okay, that I need to lay off this for a little while. So
What happened in those, just out of interest?
So the person I bought some acid off actually had a sheet of them and they got wet, and so the idiot hung them up to dry, so he wasn't sure which ones were working and which ones weren't, so he was flogging off for $5. So I bought a whole heap of them. I was in year 12 at this stage, I think. So I went to a school social. I remember going to a school dance, and he said, "Oh, they're pretty crap, so have a few." And I bombed a whole heap, and I reckon they were the bottom. And it went for a few days, and I didn't think I was coming down. So it was pretty scary. And then I didn't touch them again for a little while, often for a few months. And we were at a New Year's party, and I had another one, and just a normal sort of dosage of an acid tab, and it just went troppo again, and nearly took a swan dive off a cliff and all sorts of stuff. So wasn't after that I was like, okay, that's a bit too close for comfort, a bit too, and yeah, I was, like I said, I was probably 19 or something then, and never touched them again.
Yeah. And this is a year after, so all of that was kind of within the year of your mum dying as well. So how were you processing the grief, and how did you manage all of that?
Look, I don't think I've ever processed that grief, to be perfectly honest. Very much you sort of think back down. I've been sort of dealing with a little bit of this again just recently, just exploring sort of deep-seated emotions and stuff that have been there. But it was very much, still partying a lot during those days, and it was, just something I think deal with that later, and probably never did. But anyway.
It's interesting becoming a parent, isn't it? And it kind of makes you reevaluate a whole lot of stuff in terms of look, everything about your own parenting, like your own upbringing, and who do I want to be, and can I even be that person? And like for me, it was like I had a fantasy about what kind of mother I wanted to be, but wasn't actually true
Mm.
to who I was. And yeah, and then there's a whole lot of emotional stuff that needs to be, that I thought I had dealt with actually, and then came up in a whole different context and in a whole different way. So I get that. I get that. So
Yeah, I think there's something to be some truth to that. Whether you feel like at the time you're past it, whereas I think in my case in particular, I think compartmentalized more than processed. So it gives you that sense of I'm past that. It's a terrible time, and don't get me wrong, like I grieved. It was a terrible, terrible time, but by the same token, did I really afford myself the time to process that like I perhaps probably needed to, and or did I just compartmentalize and squash some of that emotion down and lock it up in a box and move on with your life?
yeah, absolutely. And it is a very, dare I say, and I may be entirely wrong in saying this, but it sounds like a bit of a blokey way of dealing with things, It's kind of
Sure.
compartmentalizing is kind of what men do. And it serves you, and it works at one level. And you
Yeah.
kind of get on with the things that I need to kind of do. And meanwhile, there's stuff that's unprocessed beneath the surface. Okay, so let's just kind of, and again, there's maybe some themes about not so much early trauma, but there's almost a thing actually with the Bitcoiners I've met so far where there's this quite rebellious streak. Adventurous to the degree that we can call drugs adventurous. I think back in my day, there wasn't anything adventurous about it, just everybody did it. But actually, I'm probably wrong about that. Probably not everybody did. Maybe it was just the crew I was with, But certainly more so than this generation. Like this generation seemed to me to be really straight compared to ours. Like I'm a bit older than you, fair bit older, I suspect. But yeah, anyway, so I've gone off on a tangent. So, so you've got this slightly maybe rebellious streak because life's a little bit kind of easy and breezy. So you're exploring different stuff. And in that, I mean, that was just partying. Was there an exploratory element to that as well? Was there some part of you that was seeking peace, seeking answers, or were you? It was just partying.
Partying up till mid-20s, I think. As around the mid-20s that I started exploring what does all this mean, and I think that's been a ongoing process ever since. And I guess I could probably fill in a little bit of the backstory there, but from fruit shop, did a little bit of study as far as audio engineering. So I was interested in just doing
Oh yeah.
recordings and all that sort of stuff. So I did a certificate of that. Was working in sales, worked for Telstra, sold mobile phones in a call center. Very, very good job, good pay. Gave me a lot of, communication skills and all that sort of stuff, and very much then built a life around sales leading up to ended up working for a tobacco company actually as a death dealer by trade. So that movie, Thank You for Smoking, I wasn't quite that guy, the lobbyist, but I was a sales rep. So my job was to go around the stores and basically put tobacco products into these stores. And it was around that time where I started exploring theology more than anything. And, we're just finding it really hard to get ahead. Now wife and I, started thinking about marriage and perhaps the long-term view of starting a family and so forth and having kids, and we were just struggling to make ends meet, man. Like when we were both earning good wages and still partying a fair bit, drinking too much. Drinking was still a large part of my life, dominating right through that sort of period, and just started getting a little bit like really depressed. Like the job again, wasn't enjoying that job. The job, I've spoken about this on prior pods before, so I won't delve too much into it. But that particular job, it was a salary job, And it's kind of like the incentive structure was there for you to do as little as possible and see what you could get away with. And it's a really, really toxic culture. And it's not something that I know now I resonate with at all. So it led me down a path of depression. It was kind of like, this sort of culture and environment where, like I said, you're encouraged to do as little as possible and then see how much you could get away with. But then all the stresses that, shit, what if I'm found out? What if I lose my job? Always looming in the background kind of thing. And it was a terrible, terrible environment. And it was around then that I started looking. I read that book you've probably heard of, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne.
Yeah.
That you can wish money to come to you, and to a degree, I think it's there's a lot of truths in that book about frequencies and negative thoughts, and negative thoughts will bring more negative situations to you and I do resonate with a lot of that as far as like a frequency level and energy levels, and I do think there's an interconnectivity between energies and thoughts and all that sort of thing. Where I think some of that falls short is I don't think you can magically wish for $1 million check to come in the mail tomorrow and it eventuate. But what you can do is put those positive thoughts into action about bettering your life and bringing about the circumstances which will, make you more affluent and more successful. And having that mentality is a basis of being able to change your life in the direction that you want it to go in order to bring about better circumstances, which will bring about more money and so forth. So I think there's some really, really good truths in that book. And it was from there I started sort of questioning theology a little bit. And I was like, well, is this just praying? Is what she's saying, does that lead back to, all of that teaching through the Bible and all that sort of stuff? Not that I sat down and read the Bible, but or dug too deep into a lot of these sort of theology ideas, but I did enough research to sort of come to the conclusion that most religions are sort of based on the same sort of founding principles about, sort of doing good to your neighbor, being grateful for what you have, show gratitude in your life, ask and you shall receive, like that positive affirmations and all that sort of stuff. And most religions are rooted in those sort of core beliefs of, expressing joy and being grateful and all of those things. And it's just all the bullshit that we sprinkled on top over the years for, lack of better terms, greed of man. I think, along the way, people have manipulated and thwarted sort of those they've sort of made their own narratives around those fundamental principles and called it Catholicism or called it Christianity or, being a Muslim or Islam and, Hindi. And I think like fundamentally, a lot of those religions are the same. And it's just, over the years, things have just progressed and evolved for various means. And most of it was for, like I said before, the benefit of man. They had an agenda at the time. And it's like, well, we could use this, can't we, as a control mechanism to, enact certain powers over the population. And, that's, I think the Catholic Church is a classic example of exactly that, and so that's sort of where I ended up with that sort of belief system. So I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I'd say I'm spiritual for sure.
Okay. And you said you've gone down the path of meditation a little bit of recent times too?
Yeah, recently, actually a Bitcoiner, Sama Catharo, I think his last name is. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but he's got a podcast called Bitcoin Consciousness. And he also runs some meditation groups, so group meditation. So subscribe to his Substack if it's something that anyone listening is interested in going down that path. He does like a men's group, which is over a longer period of time. But this one was, I think we did 6 sessions over 3 weeks, and it was just a guided sort of meditation. So I've been doing yoga. I guess we'll backtrack a little bit. I've been doing yoga for about 2 years. Had a very bad back. Used to have to take drugs to suppress the signal to my nerve because I had major sciatic nerve and it was basically a crippling sort of injury. Used to take these drugs for about 4 years and I just thought, you know what, these can't be good for me. I've got to get off it. So I started, I tried everything in that. So I'd probably suffered real severe pain for about 4 years. Tried acupuncture, physio, chiro, Bowen therapy, Reiki, everything and everything. The one thing I hadn't tried was yoga. So I went on, a lovely lady lives locally. Her name's Rachel, and I reached out to her and said, I need some help. I think you can help me, but I can't come to a class because I'm like basically a cripple when it comes to movement and flexibility. And so she sat me down one-on-one, and we did for about 18 months. I just went to her house for an hour on a Monday. And she did a yoga session with me. Started off on a chair, just did movements that I could manage, and then slowly but surely I go to her class as often as I'm home and I can now, and do that. But through that process, I actually started, at the end of your yoga practice, you do this practice called Shavasana, which is very much just a calming. You lie down on your back. There's like nice music playing and incense and going. And I started seeing what I now know to be the chakras. So started seeing colors, very vibrant colors, starting dancing in my mind. I didn't know what the hell they were. It's just like, this is cool. Like just tripping out, just thought they were acid flashbacks, if I'm to be perfectly honest. And then slowly but surely started seeing all of the colors. And then one day I was just talking to her. I said, when we do this, do you see colors? And she goes, oh, she's not a spiritual yoga teacher. She's very much about the practice. But she obviously has been around that scene long enough to know, and she said, oh, what you're seeing is your chakras. And so I did a little bit of research on that and realized that, meditating can, bring about that sort of peace and that calm. You can clear your chakras, and just started exploring that a little bit only in the last sort of year, on and off. And it's one of those things, like meditation takes practice. That's why they call it practice. And it's one of those things that you need to dedicate the time and the effort to do. And I just wasn't allowing myself to find that time enough. And summer was come along, and just at the right time, and it was a perfect excuse. So, it's one of those things. I sign up for it. It was on a specific time, on 2 days a week over sort of 3 weeks. And Seba, actually, from Looking Glass, we went together because we're like two peas in a pod. Hey, we share the same brain. We very different people, but we are so aligned in other things. And so we've been sort of going down this path together, and we're like, oh, well, let's go together, So we did this group meditation, and it's absolutely unreal. So it just gave me a whole set of tools to be able to get myself into a practice on my own. Because it's all well and good just to close your eyes and start focusing on your breathing, but there's very specific techniques which can help you. It's like, I think Sama described it as getting into his, it's like a pilot in a cockpit, he's checking all these instruments and go through all these processes to try and get you into a very deep meditative state. No, that was only last month we did it, but so far so good practicing the practice. And it's a powerful thing. It's addictive. I very much liken it to an acid trip, not as intense, but the feelings throughout is so enjoyable, and the feelings after are so enjoyable. It's a high. It is a high. It is so good and so addictive when you get it, and you get it deep, and you get it right, and you just allow things to come to you, and whatever comes into your mind, you explore that. And Seb and I've read a couple of books about this sort of guiding hand, and which we're sort of exploring and just allowing, whether you believe in guides or whatever you want to call them, like guardian angels or guides, or your higher self, or your emotive self. And there's all sorts of different ways to describe what I believe to be sort of fundamental sort of things. And this all sounds, pretty trippy, but there's definitely something there. There's something there to this, and it's fascinating.
Totally. And this is a big part of, I reckon, why I wanted to go down this track with this podcast, because there's some part of me. So we were just saying before that I'm reading Bitcoin, Everything Divided by 21 Million by Knut Svanholm, that I hope I'm not, butchering his name.
No, you've got Knut right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and he talks about, I'm only a few chapters into it, because each chapter I need to sit with, like I'm reading this thing like out loud going, like, I just never thought of that or seen it that way. And I've been in the Bitcoin space for not that long, like a year and a half, but and only actually relatively recently really dived down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, because prior to that I was kind of shitcoining and I'm still sort of
As
interested
we
in
all do.
Canadian stuff. Yeah, I've heard you actually talk about this as well. So, but what I'm really interested in, he talks about at one stage, he's talking about energy. I think it's like chapter 2 or something. And he talks about the concept of element zero, like the same way that zero as a number wasn't discovered or considered until a particular point in history. And I don't know enough about this to, and you're probably more of a maths geek than me to get this. And then he does the equivalent with the periodic table and goes, well, what would element zero be? And Bitcoin basically finds that through proof of work, because you can't see it, you can't know it's there until you do a reverse engineered kind of proof of work to prove that something. I'm absolutely screwing this up incredibly badly, but the point I want to get to is this, and this is what I'm really interested to hear what this gentleman who's been teaching the meditation, this Bitcoin consciousness, I will look this up. There's something about zero. There's something about element zero, if we want to call it that. There's something about Bitcoin proof of work, the kind of truth of what Bitcoin represents as, the hardest money that's ever existed. That's a kind of base layer or a foundational layer that somehow for me ties in, and I don't know how to express this, but it's something, but it relates to me, to consciousness and that base layer of being. And I feel like Satoshi, Nakamoto, God love him, her, them, whatever, has captured the essence of something that's far more than even just a proof of work. Like there's something so essential, not essential as in needed. I mean, yes, it's needed as well, but essential,
Sure.
essential, about it.
I definitely think there's something there, and I think more and more Bitcoiners are starting to, I can't speak intelligently to this enough to add sort of value to that, but I definitely think, one of Sama's things he sort of refers to in these guided meditations is I'm going to stuff it up, but it's something about the space of zero space and zero time, I think is the
right
exact sort of reference he uses. So I'm fully appreciating that there's a global consciousness shift going on right now, and many Bitcoiners are starting to explore this and pull on this thread, and again, I can't speak intelligently to it, but I do recommend a couple of things. You said the number zero. Robert Breedlove wrote a phenomenal piece on just that. Was probably what Knut's referencing. I haven't read Knut's book. It's definitely on the to read list.
I came across it because he was interviewed on Breedlove, and that's when I ordered it.
So Breedlove's got a epic piece on the number zero and the origins of the number zero, and exactly what you're alluding to there is the advancements that happened post this discovery of the number zero, and
Cool.
and also I think that wider consciousness, Bitcoin being the absolute sort of source of truth. We've never had a truth as deep or as profound, as immutable, as secure as Bitcoin in the history of records, in the history of consciousness, in the history of people's evolution throughout time, and I think that's the sort of anchor that all of these ideas are starting to proliferate off of. And again, I can't speak to that intelligently, but like John Vallis is doing some incredible thought pieces on Money Messiah and all these sort of things. There's definitely a truth to that, Gary, that I firmly believe, and I know I'm not alone in the belief, that Bitcoin has been gifted to us in many more ways than the obvious ones that we often hear about and talk about, as far as it being an immutable hard sound money for people to start saving. And I think it goes a lot deeper than we give it credit for, and I don't know how deep that goes. I'm barely scratching the surface for it, but it's a space that I'm very interested in exploring further, because I think it's shifting the global consciousness to a greater good, if nothing else. People, I mean, I've never met so many people that are willing to swap their time and energy to help this movement, help this become what it's becoming. And this is, Seb and I often say, this is a ground up swell that's unstoppable. So much focus comes on this top down. It's like this government's adopting it, or this corporation's adopting it, and forget the top down.
It's grassroots.
We are grassroots, and that's what drives us. Sorry to plug Looking Glass shamelessly here, but that's what drives us at Looking Glass as well. Is where we built this course for these people who are motivated, self-motivated people to get and educate themselves about the monetary system. But you've got to have that willingness and that drive for self-education. What about all the other poor pricks who don't know that they need this yet? How do we get in front of them? So that's why we decided to create it into a school curriculum, so that we can empower or help to empower motivated educators and teachers in the space to go out and, for want of a better term, be the disciples, go out and spread the word. But there's a lot of motivated people that just don't know where to start, or they perhaps haven't done, the 1,000 hours necessary to really understand the evolution of money and how all that. So it's like, well, we've gone and done a lot of that work collectively. Let's pool all those resources together and let's give people and make it free and accessible to those people. We don't want, we could put these things behind a paywall, and we get plenty of stick about, don't be afraid of making money. It's like, it's not about making money. It's about helping that global consciousness, that global self, to, just trying to accelerate that eventual end that we know is inevitable. It's a groundswell that's unstoppable, and we see that really, really proliferating from those people who are motivated, and we just want to help along their way to give them the tools to help them.
And there is something about what's the greatest good I can do in the time that I've got on this planet. And, we all find that this circles right back to where we started around, I've got a certain skill set and I've got a certain character that I came to Earth with, and how can I use it to do some good? And it's a funny thing, because I've been in corporate training for a long time. I train people in presentation skills, so how to stand up and present in front of a group. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable with that, of course. And it's not, I mean, it's broader than that, because it's not public speaking per se. It's very much in a business environment. So it's about, how do we present even just to our own teams? How do we do it online? How do we do it sitting down, standing up, large scale, small scale, whatever? But and that's been, and I love it. I love it. Like, I have never gotten sick of it, and I've been doing it for 28 years, right? And I love it because I get to change people's lives. Like, I get to see people transform over the course of 2 days, go from feeling really uncomfortable with it to getting it and going, right, I feel really good about it. And it's a funny thing, because COVID took my business away. I did it online for quite some time, but after 2 years in Melbourne, people got tired and went, oh, we'll do it. We're just about to go back to the office. We'll wait now till we're back in the office. And then that just got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. And that's what led me to Bitcoin, having that gap and that space in my life. And now that need to, like, as the next step, or I think it's just part of my nature. I see something, I learn something, I've got to teach it. I need to, but I don't do it well. Like, I'm really bad. Like, I'm a really bad orange pillar. Like, I just get too passionate and I get too angry and I get, you know, like with the current systems and the fiat Ponzi, and like I just, you know, like Greg Fawcett does it in a really charming way when he gets angry. I'm so not charming about it, you know.
That's hilarious.
So anyway, I think I'd be better if I was maybe doing it in front of a school group or something. But I'd probably rein myself in and take on my professional.
Well, you can't swear. Yeah.
But okay, so what's your kind of you know, we're talking about global consciousness shift, global awakening. What's your vision, your hope, your dream? Because this is a long-term proposition. You know, there's going to be a process, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be, yeah, I mean, we're seeing all of this at the moment. What do you hope for humanity as a result of Bitcoin?
It's a super good question. I just honestly, I just wish for people to be able to really reap reward for their efforts. And I mean, it's a value that I've held most of my life, and sort of I alluded to it a little bit earlier. When I went away from this, it ruined me. It led to depression and all sorts of things. It's value for value really resonates with me. I've always tried to give more value than I charge for, or give more value than I receive. And when we're on this fiat Ponzi, it's those incentives are totally eroded, and all of your efforts are going into the hands of these big corporations, and it gets labeled as capitalism. And then we've got all these fiery little millennials and Zers growing up thinking it's capitalism, and it's not capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's socialism at the top level, branded as capitalism. And now, you know, and then so they're growing up wanting more socialism, and it's, you know, then they're not realizing what they're fucking wishing for, and it's so frustrating. So I just hope that Bitcoin matures enough for the volatility, and I know volatility makes millionaires, right? So it's the volatility on the way up, as long as you can ride it out. But when it swings around like this, it is so hard to orange pill people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we were doing so well in a bull market. Of course, everyone number go up. This is brilliant. What is this thing? I got to get a piece of this. But, you know, if you haven't done the work to realize all of the FUD and everything that comes with it, and, you know, even, you know, you could argue the manipulation going on in the price right now through futures markets and ETFs. I buy into that theory. I think it's happening. If you haven't done the work, it's impossible for you to be able to realize this thing. So it's just putting a brake on it. And again, it's inevitable, but it's like, you know, all of us want it to happen tomorrow, don't we? And I just wish that over time, the volatility irons out a little bit, so that we can continue that educational effort to say, this is hard money. You put more effort in, you'll get more back out. And this is how you can save it to better your family and better your, you know, build generational wealth. Because I just think it's a total tragedy to watch what's happening in the world with people who, you know, unemployment's great, unemployment numbers, yeah, but, you know, people working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table for their kids. And it's, you know, all of that wealth just funneling into the people who own assets. You know, that's where the real inflation is in the asset prices. And granted, you know, we've had you know, a couple of months of interest rate rises, which will again just hollow out the middle class. It's a completely corrupt system. You know, it's you know, we've just spent 2 years building up these narratives around interest rates won't rise till the year 2024. I mean, Philip Lowe from the RBA should be freaking shot. Same with, you know, Jay Powell. It's like, hello, inflation's been knocking on the door. Us Bitcoiners and gold bugs have been spruiking this since you started the money printer up again in 2008. You know, we knew the writing's on the wall. You can't just print money out of thin air, give it to your cronies and, you know, and not expect, you know, it to come out in the wash in the end, you know. And so we've created this sense of number only go up in stocks and assets. And again, all of the retail money has piled into this. Meanwhile, every time there's a share, an equity share sold on the stock market, there's a seller. Who do you think's been that seller the last 2 years? It's been buy us some time. COVID hit, right? Like massive lockdowns. Of course, that was going to end up in economic fragility. Hedge funds get in contact with, the Fed and so forth, and it's like, man, we need to exit these massive positions that we've got. Buy us some time. Okay, interest rates aren't going anywhere. Make the stock market, housing prices, everything go up. Retail piles in, get over levered, and now they're in a position to say, all right, well, let's make this bad boy pop so we can swoop in and pick up the pieces. Sorry to go on this epic rant, but like it's just such it's just criminal. It's absolutely criminal, and like people just don't know that they're getting fucked.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I get really upset about the money printing and the inflation. And funnily enough, my mum was a big gold bug, and she was right on this, like from 40 years ago. So I've totally grown up on this. So I'm extremely familiar with it. But of course, until now, there was no solution. And, gold, I believe, as much as anything else, is being manipulated because Russia and China are just loading
100%.
So it's not like that, we've got serious scarcity in the gold market, and somehow that's not coming through to the price. And what's that all about? And I don't quite understand how that all works. Anyway, I don't want to kind of go on about my own opinion. I'm really interested that, like, clearly maths came very easily to you. You're really, like, as I listen to you speak about this, like the level of intelligence and articulation, but you're also keeping, okay, epic rant, but you're actually keeping a cool head about it as well. So I kind of got sort of two questions going on around this. One is, you've got two kids now. How are you? You're working full time. You're heavily involved in Looking Glass. You clearly did a massive study to get to this point of understanding of what's going on currently and the history of it all. How are you, just at a practical level, how are you doing this all?
I don't watch TV.
Right. Simple as that. Yeah. Okay. Fair call.
I just don't. I rarely will I watch a Netflix. Maybe every now and then. I just watched The Queen's Gambit. No, it was great, by the way. Highly recommend.
Awesome.
But I just
I've seen
don't.
it 3 times through. I love it.
Oh yeah.
It's like one of my all-time favorite shows.
I've just got. If I'm not doing something, I feel like I'm wasting my time. It's always just been in the back of my, and particularly when I started university. So you've probably heard that story, and I won't bore listeners with that. But I went to university. I think I started maybe 29. I was hitting around that 30 mark, and I thought I want to be an electrician. Ended up enrolling in university and working, studying, and having kids around all that time. Really taught me how to value time, and and like hats off to my beautiful wife as well. She was instrumental. Obviously, she largely raised the kids. I can't take any credit for that. Well, the studying went on. She was very, very instrumental in allowing me to be able to find the time to do that. But it was sort of like, I was pretty disciplined student, so it was 20 hours a week. I skipped all that year 10 to year 12, right? So then I went and did an electrical engineering. So I had to go and, while studying the engineering, had to go and fill in what I'd missed through year 10 and to 12, because I didn't do maths A, I didn't do maths B, I didn't do maths C, I didn't know calculus, I didn't know advanced trigonometry, so I had to backfill a lot of math and a lot of science. So I told you I got kicked out of science in year 10, so I never went back to science. So there was a lot of physics that I had to backtrack. So I had to put the work in. And again, this is probably, this is proof of work. So I did 20 hours a week of study religiously, because I had to get through it. And it was after that 20 hours a week of university study that I did for 7.5 years that I went, now what? Now what do I do with this?
Yeah.
I'm used to doing 20
Yeah.
hours a week. Well, how about investing's fun? Like, how about I put 20 hours a week into investing, see if I can actually, now I'm earning a good wage. How about I turn that into more money? And like friends of mine have often ribbed me about, I don't share a lot on Facebook. I'm not a big Facebooker, but I do share some, articles that I've written over the years and, little quips and just stuff about, sort of the egregious going on of the Federal Reserve and all that sort of stuff. And they often say, you're so obsessed with money. I'm like, I'm not obsessed with money. I'm obsessed with what money can buy me. I'm obsessed with the freedom that I see is possible by putting in the hard yards now. I can enjoy a fruitful life in an early retirement. I don't want to be working until I'm 67.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope I'm not working until 67. I will never stop working, though. I will just do what I want to do. And what I want to do right now is Looking Glass. I want to educate people. I want to help people come to the realizations that I've come to the realizations of. But I also recognize that not everybody is wired like me. People aren't motivated to read books. A lot of my friends and family have never even read a book. And, I'm a vicious reader. I love reading. I chew through as many books as I can get through. But again, not everyone's wired like me. So it's like, hey, well, how do I reach these people? How do I talk to these people? And if I can do that for the rest of my life, that's a very rewarding, fulfilling existence in my book. So it's not like I see money is a means to an end. And I'm wired into this fiat lifestyle right now. I work hard, I work overtime. We're working a public holiday today over in sunny Palm Island, keeping the lights on for people. But I get rewarded for that effort. I get an hourly rate. I get overtime. I get an overtime rate. I'm lucky. I have that job where that is your input is rewarded. So the more I put in, the more I take out, and the more stats I can stack and bring forward that retirement.
Lovely. Listen, I'm conscious of time at this stage, yours, mine, the listeners, whoever may be listening in, if anyone. So any final words, got a final message for any good folk who may be listening or watching?
No, I just think this was fun. It was fun. It's fun to talk about stuff that's not often spoke about. So I hope didn't bore too many people. I hope someone got something out of it. But again, I just think value for value. Put in the hard yards now. We'll get rewarded. Stack the stats while they're cheap, because I don't think we'll see prices like this again. There might be some further downside to the Bitcoin price momentarily, but take a long-term view of this thing, and you won't get another opportunity like we're getting now. And the more people that realize it, the quicker that'll come to fruition.
Yeah. What's here? The final question. Definitely final question. 10-year price prediction.
10-year price prediction. 10 years.
2032.
Oh, shit. 2032 price prediction. 10 mil a coin.
Nice. Okay.
In today's purchasing
Breedlove
power.
says 12 mil. Is Breedlove 12 mil? I think.
Not too sure. No, I see 10 mil in today's purchasing power too. You need to caveat that. But yeah. No, look, I think we've never seen a monetary good like this. What it can do, what it means, payment rails through to hard money, through to savings, through to once 7 billion people realize what this thing is, they're going to be polling as hard as we all are.
Yeah. Here's to that. Cheers to that. Daz, this is me doing cheers to you with my cuppa, with my Pac-Man cuppa.
I'll be on the waters.
Nice.
Cheers,
nice. I'm having my green and lemon tea. Daz, what an absolute pleasure. I did not expect the conversation to go where it went. I'm totally thrilled, but it did. What a fascinating insight. Appreciate you taking the time. I know you are crazy flat out, and we've taken some time to line this up. We got there in the end.
It was a pleasure.
And
I'm sorry it took so long, actually.
And I'll look forward to being in contact, because I'm hoping I might be able to get involved in Looking Glass education myself. So we'll chat more about that offline.
For sure.
All right. You be well.
Love to.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Karen.
Great to meet you. Cheers for now. See you.
See ya, you too.